Hey guys, my name is Bryce. Today I'm doing a video on my new 2018 spell counter deck, which I didn't think I was really going to do a deck profile on spell counters, really until I thought I was going to potentially get my hands on some of these cards from the leak of what Extreme Force had to offer. And that was pretty much just an upgrade to spell counters in general through kind of re-rigging the way that some pendulum monsters would work. Anyway, I'm actually going to start not with the main deck, but with the side deck first, and then get into the core of it soon afterwards. So to start off with Dark Rebellion XYZ Dragon, or XYZ, and the purpose of this is pretty much, if I have two level 4s and I'm facing up against a gigantic monster, this is the one and only card to kind of get over that, if it's too difficult to remove or destroy or something. Then I have two copies of Mistar Boy, followed by two Nimble Beavers. Now, I would actually say this is a small engine, and let me kind of tell you why. So, with Mistar Boy, in this deck in particular, I really don't have any water monsters, aside from one that's also in the extra deck, or in the side deck rather. So, the reason for this, I don't really have any other water monsters except for what's in the side deck. So the reason I have this out is it basically just opens up two openings for link monsters. So if I find I'm playing against an opponent who is slow enough that I can permit to have, you know, two extra monsters at the same time, great. If not, well, I can at least expect to have that, you know, have to cycle through something else, so I'll just deal with that. But the reason why I have two Mistar Boys and then two Nimble Beavers is there's actually a nice thing where if I normal summon it, I can special summon another Nimble monster from my deck or graveyard. First time around, it's going to be from my deck. It's a pretty thick deck, so I'm rarely ever going to see these two in a bad draw together, but more importantly, bring these two out, instantly have a Mistar Boy. Once Mistar Boy is taken out on the same turn or next turn or something like that, all I have to do is have Nimble Beaver be returned back to my hand from Mistar Boy going to the graveyard, normal summon Nimble Beaver, and then because of its effect where I can get a Nimble Beaver as a Tongue Twister back from my graveyard to the field, I can bring out another Mistar Boy. It's a nice first and second chance of having two link zones. Follow this by Divine Wrath and Spell Shield type 8. If I do need some counter traps, this is great for against effect monsters. And then this one, I'm always going to have spell cards in my hand, so this is great just to counter kind of anything that's taken at me, especially Raigeki and, you know, pretty good staple spell cards that my opponent will probably use against me. Then we have Set Rotation and Secret Village of the Spellcasters. This is especially strong if I can search it out and set it with Alchemic Magician, but in any case, Secret Village of the Spellcasters lets me lock my opponent out from using spell cards if they don't have a spellcaster monster. Otherwise, Dark Core, great as just like a hard removal. Blizzard Princess, just if I'm afraid of spells and traps being used against me in battle. This is a huge beater that only needs one tribute because of its effect. Next we have Perform a Damage Juggler. I don't have it in the main deck just so I can try and run the combos that I need to, but hey, if I'm up against Trickstars or something, perfect time for it. Then I have Mythical Beast, Basilisk. I got two of these just from actually pulling it and stuff in the packs that I got. I don't have enough of a demand for it right now in what I'm using with my strategy. Mainly it's just to get cards from my extra deck into my main deck of pendulum cards, and then I get to draw a card. So that's kind of good, but I'd much rather just have more reliable plays and things like that. I can remove 3 spell counters from the field, return 1 Mythical Beast card from your pendulum zone, or from your extra deck to your hand. That is way better, but again, that's something I'd have to play as opposed to special summoning it, which is Medusa's effect, and I consider that to be a little bit better for what I'm looking for. So that's why these are all in the side deck. Now to the main deck. So I personally have 2 copies of Arcane Magician, and I'll get to the rest of the extra deck at the end of the video. However, I'm actually going to start with the trap card section first, because it is very brief in the main deck. Starting with Dark Renewal, actually. This is in particular where your opponent normal special summons a monster, you can target one of those monsters, and one spellcaster monster you control. You can send both monsters to the graveyard, so it's kind of like a trap hole in a way, as long as you're able to tribute one of your spellcasters, and you can special summon one dark spellcaster monster from your deck or graveyard. Great to have for just kind of your opponent's turn searching and things like that. Then I just have Quaking Mirror Force. And that's it for the trap lineup. I could have maybe some other potential trap cards from my side deck, but aside from that, that's all I can think of. This really wants to play just on your turn specifically. Now we're going to have 1 Day of Peace for a bit of draw power, free spell counter, and a bit of stalling. This is a deck that's basically something that gets to gain a whole lot of momentum quickly, but it's not really a routine, first turn kill or anything like that. Which is why you also have 3 Swords of Revealing Light in this deck. I wish I could say I was kidding, but it's really come in quite useful where if you have quite a few other higher priority spell cards on your field, you can use this as just a lightning rod for your opponent to MST first, or the equivalent of effect, of course. Or if they really do want to get rid of that sort of stuff, this buys you time to kind of recover a little bit, at least from attacks and things like that. Then I have 2 Spell Power Grasp. This one really just has the usefulness of being able to add spell counters by force to cards that might gather them through other means. An example of that I'll get to. Then you have Hammer Shot. I would actually play this more early than most other players, just because quite a few of the monsters that I have can gain attack to be pretty substantial if they're able to gain momentum, so I try and use this before that happens. Next I have Spellbook of Secrets and Spellbook of Power twice. This is a tiny kind of micro engine of just getting spell counters, but also being able to give attack boost and search at the same time, so a lot of this, is very complementary to the rest of the deck, but you can easily take it out if you want more consistency. Now, Arcane Barrier works super well with Spell Power Grasp, actually, just in order to be able to sort of forcefully add another spell counter to it, and if I've got an extra spellcaster on the field that I can tribute off, as long as they've got a decent amount of 2 or 3, potentially 4 spell counters on it, I can actually get quite a lot of draw power, which is nice. Following this, I have 2 copies of Magical Citadel of Endymion. This is a workhorse card of the deck. Just being able to really pool a lot of your spell counters, and actually the reason why I have this bag out is because I use so many of these die at once just to, represent all the different counters I accumulate with this one card, so I use it quite a lot. I have 2 just because 3 I'll end up seeing it a little bit too much, but I also have 2 Terraforming, which again will, if I have a monster out on the field already, give an extra spell counter just to have the activation go off, so that's why I have 2 of those, and then 2 of the Citadel only. Then I have Upstart Goblin. Next I have Mage Power. Even though really I'd just like to have Power of the Guardians 3 times. This is not a bad card to have based on one of the X-Deck monsters that I have. But the main attraction, of course, is Power of the Guardians. This one I feel like hopefully won't get exploited, and I don't think it will because it still relies on spell counters. If an attack is declared involving the equipped monster, place a spell counter on the card. The equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense for each spell counter on this card. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can remove 1 spell counter from the field instead. So not only can this borrow from somewhere else on the field, which is nice, but you can actually soup it up, as I also mentioned before, just from Spell Power Grasp to give it a bit of bonus, but this is a card that's a great example of this deck's kind of playstyle of gaining momentum in order to get quite a lot of advantage, sort of early mid to mid game, I would say, in terms of getting the resources that you need. Next I have 1 copy of Mythical Bestiary. Now funny enough, all these new Extreme Force cards I got pretty much from this set or trading just through one event. It's really not that many, but it's just the fundamentals that I need to get this deck to work. So I was lucky I kind of got the cards I was needing. This one mills a little bit, which this deck doesn't benefit a lot from milling. There's only, I would say, 4 cards that benefit from being in the graveyard right away, but I'll get to a card that makes the most use out of that, which is Foolish Burial. Once we get to the monsters, this will make a lot of sense, but there's some cards you absolutely want to have in the graveyard as soon as you can to activate their effects. Otherwise, milling kind of blindly with Bestiary is good, but you don't have pretty good odds for it. Anyway, you have Magician of Faith for bringing out some of the single spell cards, like Upstart Goblin, that you are limited to 1 of. It's something that you'll have to waste a normal set on, but if you can get back your copy of, say for example, Swords of Revealing Light, it can buy you quite a lot of time again and things like that. So as long as you can use it wisely, I choose actually to keep it in the main part of the deck here. Next we have Performapal Odd-Eyes Synchron. Now you're going to see quite a lot of level 4 Pendulum monsters, and this is just to get out a level 6 Synchro. Easy as that. The effect is really solid, and I only have 1 copy of it, just because the Synchro itself isn't great, but if you can, again, have it kind of play out mid-game or something like that, as long as you've got quite a lot of counters already on something, then the monster I'm talking about, you'll get quite a lot of utility out of. Next we have Hat Tricker. It's kind of in response to being able to fight against Trickstars, but more importantly, it's a pretty easy special summon for a level 4 spellcaster for the extra deck. Speaking of which, if you have not 1 but 2 Summoner Monks, having these 2 out almost instantaneously, and finally another level 4 spellcaster monster, you're going to get a combo which I'll mention in a second, which can be quite useful. Next I have 2 Breaker the Magical Warriors. I really don't want to have back row ruin my day with this deck if I can try and attack with huge monsters, so hopefully this can help clear out once or twice, so I'm kind of ready to make my plays. And it's actually got a decent attack if things seem to be safe at the time. Next I have Witch of the Black Forest, great for searching quite a few cards in this deck. I haven't thought of a better replacement for her, but if you have an idea, leave it in the comments down below. Next I have 3 copies of Magical Exemplar. This is another workhorse of the deck. She just special summons so many cards all the time. You can get a ton of spell counters on her first, before, even if you need to tribute her off. The fact you can special summon from your hand or from the graveyard gives you tons of options to make different plays with this deck. Next we have Mythical Beast Medusa. Now this one I prefer way over the new Mythical Beast Basilisk, and the rarity kind of reflects that as well, but this basically lets you get stuff out of the graveyard and actually put a spell counter on it, so this means you can instantly kind of revive Breaker the Magical Warrior and have it with 1 counter on it already ready to go, which is nice. But if it's as a monster, it actually lets you cut the attack and defense of a monster in half of a monster on the field, which is nice. So there's actually a little bit more battle advantage you can get, so I quite like that. Next we have, and we're getting into the more strong monsters of the deck before we go to the extra deck, Mythical Beast Jackal King. This is a great one, which you can probably see from the text. Effectively, if you have the main Mythical Beast boss monster in your extra deck, use this card to bring that out, which is easy, for free pretty much. But otherwise, when it's on the field though, you can just play 1 spell card, adds 2 spell counters to it, which is what it needs for requirement, to remove 2 spell counters from the field, negate the activation of a monster's quick effect, and if you do, destroy that card. So it's great. Instead of having to do, say for example, the Divine Wrath, this just needs a spell card to fuel it up, and it's ready to go. And it's actually a pretty strong monster of 2,400 just on its own for 1 tribute. Next we have Destrudio, the Lost Dragon's Frisson. I've got 2 of them because after using it and having it played out as a synchro, it actually goes back in the deck, so the more you play it, the more frequently you'll see it over and over again, which is quite nice, but also I don't have any other cards really that you have to pay a lot of life points for in this deck, so you do have the luxury of being able to pay half your life points each time, but that also means you can use it quite a lot even towards the end of the game, which is great if you're getting more down. Next, we have Endymion the Master Magician twice. If you can get this card in the graveyard as fast as you can, only to revive it shortly afterwards, that's great. It basically lets you add a spell card from your graveyard to your hand if you're able to bring it out with the Citadel of Endymion. But at least from that, once per turn you can discard one spell card and destroy one card on the field. And it's got a decent attack on it, and it's dark. Hey, you can bring that out with the trusty Dark Renewal. Actually, same thing goes for Jackal King as well. Last, we have Mythical Beast Cerebus. I was actually able to pull this card randomly from my locals tournament, which I was really not expecting. Actually, after opening up this entire Extreme Force box, I found this in a random pack, kind of the last minute of the day, so that was a nice find. So I'm happy with that, but especially with the effect of it as a monster card. The effects of the Pendulum monster itself, I wouldn't really bother with, but each time a spell card is activated, place 2 counters on the card. If it has 4 counters on it, it cannot be destroyed by card effects, which is great. And that's especially on the field, actually, so you can have, you know, a souped up Citadel of Endymion, and suddenly, once it's on the field, as long as there's 4 on the field somewhere for counters, then this guy is safe, which is awesome. Now, for the rest of it though, you can remove 4 spell counters from your field again, and then target one monster your opponent controls, banish it face up, and if you do, this card gains attack equal to the banished monster's original attack until the end of your opponent's turn. So this actually stays strong for a little bit longer than it even necessarily needs to be. So super great card to kind of wrap up for the main deck. Now for the extra deck, we have 2 copies of Arcane Magician, which I'll flip through in the next couple of cards. But following that, we have Power Tool Dragon. Reason being, he can take a ton of advantage from Power of the Guardians. Now if you happen to have its effect where you search for Mage Power instead, it could be worse. So the main thing is just giving it decent attack power and things like that, so it's not a bad way to start. I've always just liked the artwork of this card, and once I realized, hey, that's a level 7, and you know, I've got Destrudio anyway, if the situation calls for it, this is actually a really great card to bring out. If I can get just the attack of it souped up and have its, you know, kind of effectively double protection power and things like that from its own effect, then it's just a really strong monster to have on the field. Its machine, I mean, could be dragon and still have the same, you know, results of being an otherwise all spellcaster deck. But hey, for what it is, I really like it, and I'm glad I can play it in this deck. Next, we have another wild card of High Speed Droid Kendama. If for some reason the next monster that's a level 6 Synchro Tempest Magician is just not necessary, funny enough, they're the same attack points, but anyway, this is a great way of just being able to revive from my graveyard. If I have no monsters, like say I get Torrential Tributed or something like that, and next turn I'm able to do kind of one play, then the next play, then suddenly have this out, thanks to Odd Eyes Synchron and things like that. So to get this out and Tempest Magician out aren't too difficult, and then it's just a decision between these two for which play I want to make. Now Tempest Magician is kind of the best burner of this deck. However, she's very situational, so I won't play her all that often unless it's kind of going for game. Next we have Performage Trapeze Magician, and funny enough, Performage actually plays into Hat Trigger too, so that's nice. But in any case, this is again kind of like a sort of hard counter against the Trickstar deck, where as long as you can have damage under 2,500, you're going to be fine. But it's also just nice as a bit of a beater, and kind of fending off smaller effect damage and things like that from other decks that try and burn you as well, so that's nice. And then finally we have Alchemic Magician. Now, she's been sitting in my binder for trading for a little while until I put this deck together, where if you can get, say for example, Summoner Monk, and then kind of a level 4 spellcaster of your choice, you are able to get her out pretty easily, and considering there's so many spells to give her a boost, just from having that effect of Summoner Monk having to discard a spell card twice, this automatically is just going to be guaranteed to be brought up to 1,900, and from there, hopefully it gets stronger, but its secondary effect is great, where at the end of the turn you can detach a material, choose one spell card from your deck, set it in your spell and trap zone. That's ideal to set off for your quick play spell card of set rotation, for example. There's a few other ones that you can add for your own kind of flavor and things like that, but if it's not that, otherwise it's just good for bringing out other cards like Terraforming if you're in a pinch, or quite a few other spell cards that, yes, you don't get to use it in that turn right away, which is disappointing, but aside from that though, there's plenty of great uses for it, just to set up for your next turn and everything like that. So that wraps it up for my Spell Counters deck, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.